Hello and welcome to France 24. It's good to have you with us. Let's go straight to our top story. One step forward, two steps back. Israel promises to release more than 24 Palestinian prisoners next week. However, the country is also planning to build more than 1,000 settlement homes in occupied East Jerusalem and in the West Bank. This comes just a few days before peace negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians are due to resume. Now, in just a few moments, we'll be speaking to the spokesperson of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But first, let's hear what Hanan Ashrawi has to say about this. She's a close ally of Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, and according to her, Israel is simply not making any effort to smooth relations between the two rivals.
What it puts in question is Israel's commitment to peace, because it is a deliberate attempt at derailing the peace talks and, of course, at undermining the whole impetus for peace in the region. So it betrays Israel's real intentions by creating facts on the ground and creating the outcome of negotiations, acting not just as an occupier, but as a country that has forcibly annexed the West Bank rather than is negotiating in order to establish a two-state solution.
Well, for more on this story, Mark Regev joins us from Jerusalem. Mr. Regev, you're Benjamin Netanyahu's spokesman, and we've just heard Hanan Ashrawi there. What do you say to Palestinians' accusations that Israel isn't invested in the peace talks?
It's not true. We want to see the talks succeed, and I'd ask everyone to look very carefully exactly where Israel is building. We're building in the Jewish neighborhoods of Jerusalem, and we're building in the large blocks. You know, in all the different peace plans that have been on the table over the last decade and a half, those areas remain part of Israel. And I would ask, if we're building in any case in areas that remain part of Israel, what is the big problem?
But Mr. Regev, the Palestinian chief negotiator Saeb Erekat says that the new settlements are meant to harm the peace talks. Do you understand that this announcement can be seen as a provocation just 3 days before the second round of the talks?
Well, let's be clear here. The Palestinians, in their own internal documents that everyone saw in the media just a while ago, they themselves have admitted that they've accepted that the Jewish neighborhoods of Jerusalem and the large blocks will stay part of Israel in final status peace. So there appears to be a difference between the public posturing of the Palestinian side and, of course, what their real positions are. Now, the settlement issue will be resolved around the negotiating table along with all the other issues, and we're eager to get started with those talks.
Right, so isn't the timing a provocation, though?
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, according to what was agreed with the Americans and the Palestinians, these negotiations will start and last for 9 months. And in this decision today to build in Jerusalem and in the large blocks, I mean, Mr. Netanyahu is continuing with a policy that all previous Israeli prime ministers have adopted, whether it was Olmert or Sharon or Barak. This is a policy, I mean, to ask an Israeli government not to build in Jerusalem, that really is a bridge too far.
Now, the announcement coincides with the release of Palestinian prisoners. What is this? Is this a trade-off?
We want to see the peace process move forward, and we were ready for mutual confidence-building measures to get this process underway. And the prisoner release obviously is not an easy decision for Israel, but we are prepared to do so as part of getting this process back on track, as part of mutual confidence-building measures. We want to see Israelis and Palestinians sit and talk and negotiate and find solutions and move forward towards peace.
But Mr. Regev, let's get this straight. Back in 2010, talks actually broke down, namely due to the issue of settlements. How do you think this is going to affect Wednesday's meeting?
Well, they broke down not because of Israel, but because the Palestinian side refused to negotiate. Now, no side can dictate to the other side its positions. And if the Palestinians want to dictate to us their positions on settlements before negotiations get underway, it's a mistake. We won't dictate to them. They don't have to dictate to us. We're ready for a process of negotiation, and we want to move forward. And nothing that the Israeli government decides today precludes the possibility of a viable independent Palestinian state. On the contrary, we're building on land where there's almost an international consensus that this land stays part of Israel.
But Mr. Regev, do you think that Israel is going to continue building settlements? And what about what's going to happen to East Jerusalem?
Well, first of all, we're not building new settlements. We're only building in existing communities. That's very important to stress. There are no new settlements being built. And we're building in neighborhoods in Jerusalem and in the large blocks where everyone understands, in every peace plan that's been on the table, I think, over the last 20 years, these areas remain part of Israel. And there's no problem, there's no real contradiction between building in these areas and the hope to see a two-state for two-people solution where you'll have an independent Palestinian state living in peace with the Jewish state.
But East Jerusalem is recognized internationally as Palestinian, isn't it?
Many countries would say that, but the same international community says the Jewish neighborhoods of Jerusalem remain part of Israel in final status peace. And so once again, if the international community says these neighborhoods will remain part of Israel in final status peace, what is the problem in building there?
Okay, Mark Regev, thank you very much for giving us your point of view on France 24.